Ready? This meeting of the Margate City Planning Board is called to order. Please stand for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Here.
Clem Wozleski. Rich Patterson.
Here.
Mike Cristaldi. Here. Jim Galantino. Here. Margaret Gubernalti. Here. Craig Palmisano. Here. Remy Pelosi. Here. Joe DiGirolamo. Here. Ron Gruppo. Here. Michael Richmond. Stephen Giuseppe.
This meeting is being held in accordance with due public notice thereof and pursuant to the New Jersey State Sunshine Law. Notice of this meeting was advertised in the press, and a copy of same has been posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building. All applicants are hereby advised that should you receive board approval tonight, you must come forward and sign a form which informs you regarding the timing of receiving building permits and mercantile licenses. At the end of your case tonight, please see the board administrator to sign the two information sheets. I'd like to hear a motion to approve the minutes of the July 25th, 2019 meeting.
I'll make that motion.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. Motion passes. I'd like to make a motion for approval of decisions and resolutions. Number 26, 2019, Chuck Simons.
I'll make a motion.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. Motion passes. For this first case, Ms. Gubernaldi is recusing herself. The case is Scott Paymer, 5 North Monroe Avenue, Block 230, Lot 303, in the MF District to grant C variances relief for building coverage, side yard setback, combined side yard, and possibly others. Taxes and water are current, and proof of advertising and notifying is satisfied. Mr. McLaurin, will you be sworn in?
Sure. Rich, before we get there, I know there's 2 applications on the agenda that aren't going forward, and the Dicker application, Chris, are you representing them?
Yeah, I've been retained, it's Chris Valenson for the record, I've been retained as of a couple days ago to present that application. I understand the plan was deficient. Mr. McLaren and some board members determined that it should not go forward. We carry that to next month, submit a plan within the appropriate time frame under the statute, and would ask that it be carried with no further notice being required, if that's acceptable to the board.
Okay, and I talked to your client today too, and I told her I'd make that announcement. So the application of Samara Dicker, which is 408 North Exeter Avenue, Block 607.02, Lot 33.05, will be heard on September 26th, 2019, 6:30 p.m. in this room. The applicant will not be required to republish or renotice. So if you're here for that one, take note of that. And then
Number 10.
I think number 10, yes.
Yeah.
Mr. Goldstein, anything on that?
Thank you, Mr. Mattis. Eric Goldstein on behalf of the Bidners. We'd also, as Chris just said, asked to have this carried to the next meeting and not have to re-advertise or renotice, and we'll be hopefully contacting some of the neighbors to work a few issues out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so the application of Brad and Michelle Binder, 113 South Essex Avenue, which is Block 5.01, Lot 7. If you're here for that application, it's going to be held on September 26, 2019, 6:30 p.m. in this room. The applicant will not be required to republish or renotice.
For the record, Mike Richmond has just entered the room. Okay. Where were we? Oh, swear in, Roger.
Oh, sorry. Mr. McLaurin, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thanks.
Thank you, Board Chairman, board members. This is 400 North, right?
No, 5 North, right?
report is based on the application of Scott Paymer at 5 North Monroe Avenue, Block 230, Lot 303, within the MF zone. When the FEMA effective firm within the effective firm map of elevation 10, so the required first floor is elevation 14. Background, the applicant is seeking relief from the ordinances of the city of Margate in order to construct a new flood-compliant two-family dwelling with variances being requested for items addressed below. The existing structure is to be raised. The site is located within the MF or multifamily zone. The proposed use is a two-family and therefore TF zoning rules apply as per Schedule B1. Page 1 and 2 is the zoning chart, and I contrast TF requirements versus the MF zone requirements. And there have been 3 variances identified. The first one is combined side yard setbacks, whereas the minimum combined side yard setback for the TF residential zone based on a lot width of 18.5 feet, and the proposed minimum combined side yard setback is 16.33 feet. Building coverage, whereas the maximum building coverage for the TF zone for this particular lot, 30% and 45% is proposed. 45% is the maximum building coverage allowed in the multifamily zone, and if 3 more units were to be constructed, but the property does not meet the density requirements for 3 units. The third variance is the third floor deck, which is not permitted unless it's on waterfront property or beach block. And just to clarify something, I know Chris has handed out a copy of the online version of Schedule B1. The asterisk was removed from that zoning chart, which requires, I read it directly from the plan.
This here?
No, there used to be an asterisk next to the MF.
Oh, okay.
It says, regardless of zone, the table to the left shall apply to the development of any single-family or two-family home in the city of Margate. And as per past practice, that has been complied with for the last several years. Again, there could be a little discrepancy here, but I think Chris will use that argument with the lot coverage or the building coverage. So I think we should have an open mind to that and maybe make some adjustments to the zoning ordinance. The documents reviewed are on page 2 or page 3. To discuss the variances, no waivers have been requested. Again, the comments, like the comment number 1, I just went over that, the MF zoning district, how it's preferred to slide over and take it as a single-family zone. The minimum side yard setback for residential use for the existing lot width is 8 feet. 8 feet is proposed, so a variance is not required. It's just the combined side yard setback based on lot width according to the zoning chart to the left. Building coverage for this lot is permitted to have 30% building coverage based on TF zone, or actually it's the size of the lot. And since the lot is 5,000 square feet, it defaults to 30%. 45% is being proposed. Again, I think the architect presumed that the 45% carries over to the MF zoning, which it is within the MF zone. But according to the ordinance, everything slides to the left. A couple dimensions should be added to the plans. There should be a condition of approval if approval was made. Item number 12, comment number 12, the distance between the curb cuts is not shown, and an attempt shall be made to make one large curb cut opening instead of 2 to allow for more on-street parking. Recommendations are shown on the report. Again, not to make this what it really isn't. That concludes my report.
Thank you, members of the board.
It is.
Thank you, members of the board. My name is Chris Balance, and I represent Scott Paymer, who's here this evening. Contract purchaser of 5 North Monroe Avenue. It's block 230 and lot 303, located in the multifamily zone. It's the concrete lot that is situated right next to the Chelsea Title Building, right to on the base side of that. The street appearance is all concrete. It is a current non-conforming structure. It is it's two detached units which are both currently legal. It's considered a duplex on its tax card. That is not permitted in Margate, it's not permitted in most towns, to have two principal structures habitable on one lot. One of the benefits of this application is to eliminate that non-conforming use or structure and bring it into conformance. Scott had intended to purchase this lot and submit a by right application. He hired Robert, who went to the ordinance, designed a building, snuck in a third floor deck, so we think we're here for a third floor deck. It's actually, he really did sneak it in because it's designed just the way it should be. It's kind of tucked in and not hanging out over the sidewalk. But be that as it may, Roger did his report and reminded me that there are instances when a duplex and the multifamily would revert to the two-family criteria because of the way the ordinance was written. However, what I handed out to you is the most recent zoning ordinance. If you look at the top of the multifamily on the B1 schedule, go all the way to the right, one from the end, the MF zone, that's what we're in. There's no asterisk next to that MF. In prior years, there had been. And it said, all single-family or duplex proposals in this zone, look at the chart to the left. It doesn't say it anymore. It doesn't direct you to do that anymore.
What was the chart to the left?
Well, the chart to the left was two-family, under what Roger's looking at. The chart to the left now is S40 waterfront, which gives me 50% coverage. I'm pretty sure you don't want that to apply. So, Robert designed the building consistent with the MF standards that are in the ordinance. That ordinance is online, where everybody's referred to. When they ask for an ordinance, it's online. That's what's there. So he designs the building, it's 45% coverage. Roger does his report. And in fairness, the prior ordinances do have the asterisk and do say, look to the left at two-family. That's if you use an old ordinance. Robert used the new ordinance and designed it at 45%. Now, even if you say you should have known, or it's past practice, you should have known, think about this. A triplex would be permitted on a lot of 6,600 square feet with 45% coverage. We are meeting the coverage for this zone at 45%. Across the board, you're allowed to put whatever's permitted in this zone at 45%. For some reason, there was some intent at some point in time to penalize a duplex and reduce it to 30% at a 5,000 square foot lot, which, if you think about it, doesn't make sense because as much as we encourage townhouse design as opposed to an over and under garden apartment, on a 5,000 square foot lot, 30% coverage is a 1,500 square foot footprint and 750 square feet per unit. Nobody would build that. Nobody would buy that property. Nobody would advance that plan at 750 square feet per unit. So I still suggest that there may have been an intent to straighten out this MF zone zoning. Just it hasn't been done correctly yet. It should be 45%. 45% gives you a 1,500 square foot footprint on a 5,000 square foot lot. That's a reasonable unit, side by side, like Robert designed. If you decide that the MF zoning does apply as it shows in the ordinance, there's also no combined side yard requirement. It's just 8 and 8. So that's the variance-free application, but for the third floor deck. That's following the ordinance as you see it. Nobody knows, I mean, if an out-of-town architect comes in and has never designed a duplex in the multifamily zone, he looks online, he follows this criteria. He doesn't know that in the past there had been some other machination of this particular zoning use. So I don't know how the board wants to deal with that. Maybe you take a preliminary vote later on and vote on whether or not the MF standards as shown apply in the most recent ordinance. Or for some reason say, you should have looked at the old ordinance. That's not common. Should you determine that we should have looked at the old ordinance and applied the two-family zone, then the combined side yard of 2 feet deviation variance is required, as is the coverage variance from 30 to 45. But remember,
I don't think we should, let's vote on your variances. I don't think we should determine that tonight. I think we would need to discuss that more. I agree with what you're saying, but,
okay, I'll leave that up to you. That's
Yeah.
just a suggestion.
right.
Voting on the variances means we should have known to go to the two-family zone despite the way the ordinance is drafted.
In fairness to that question, though, you and I have had this discussion on this property for about 2 months now.
We have, absolutely have discussed it. I don't know about 2 months, but we absolutely have discussed it. And we're going back and forth
9
about,
weeks.
about how, how it should apply. I agree with that. I don't draw, I don't draw the plan. I just look at the ordinance.
Right.
And I said to you, when we did discuss it, I don't think it's correct. And you said, we got to deal with the way it is. So, and we did, that's fine. And if you vote on the variances, then Roger's correct, and that's fine.
And we could fix it, but I don't want to rush the fixing of it
We're here
for
tonight, I
yeah.
understand that. With that having been said, let me introduce Robert Cajun, John Barnhart. Both can be sworn.
Sure, you can each come up and just state your name and business address. I'll swear you in together.
Robert Cajun, architect, 615 North Fredericksburg Avenue, Margate, New Jersey.
John Barnhart, Arthur Ponzio Company, 400 North Dover Avenue, Atlantic City.
And John's going to justify the variances. He's not going to get into what I just talked about. He said, I'm leaving that to you. Robert, if you would you design the building?
Yes.
Just going to swear him in, Chris.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Do you each swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thanks.
You're the architect for the project
Yes,
and designed this building?
yes.
Would you just kindly take the board through the building and show them what it is you've designed?
Could you each take a microphone now that he sat down? Robert was,
I designed a house when I initially looked at the zoning schedule, okay? And when we did the design, it was important for Scott. He wanted to have a deeper front yard. And to be able to park in the front and have a nice landscape buffer on each side of the property. The way the average setbacks came out with the property, we were actually allowed to build the front porch within 5 feet of the property line. And also the front setback for the house could also be 10 feet. But we chose to go 17 and a half feet and 5 feet because he wanted to have the green space and buffering between the driveways. And we decided to pursue a variance for the setbacks because we wanted to make the unit wider instead of making the unit deeper. Scott had the option of extending the house forward to the 5 foot and to the 10 foot, but that would have pushed the house much further and would reduce the amount of light and air. So they decided to go for the variance and have smaller side yard setbacks versus having a much larger front yard setback. And I feel that's a nice trade-off, having the bigger front yard setback and deck setback and able to give them the more green space in the front. So that's one of the reasons we're here tonight.
And how about the units? Would you describe how the units lay out?
And the way the units were designed were to be designed as side-by-side, and the entranceways are off of the side yard or side yard entranceway to have a nice privacy and give the feeling of it not being a duplex, but you have your own entryway and you have your own driveway and you have some bit of a nice bit of green space, which is approximately almost 7 feet in width between the driveways
Yeah,
to have a nice buffered area.
Your own segregated back rear yard?
Yes, and the rear yards will be separated with a fence.
Robert, in your experience, is the townhouse design or the side-by-side a preferable duplex design as opposed to an
Yes.
apartment style?
Yeah, it's more preferable to have a side-by-side versus above each other because there's more privacy, it's quieter, and it's actually, it's a more safer because you're separated by a firewall between the units.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
John, Mr. Barnhart? The board will accept Mr. Barnhart's credentials as a professional planner and
yes,
engineer?
we could
Thank you.
accept,
John, without asking you question after question after question, would you take the board through the zoning, the current conditions of the property, and then what is proposed in the variances?
Sure. Just talk loud. Should I just talk loud?
And if you would lean that microphone, Stephen, towards him, that'll pick him up. That's perfect. You can just,
So, the property in question is a 50-foot wide by a 100-foot deep lot on Monroe Avenue. It is, as Chris pointed out, directly behind the old title company building that we were just here for Chuck Simons. He was just fortunate to receive approval for his project. The site, so this site is, while this site is in the MF, the multifamily zone, it is immediately abutting the commercial zone that fronts on the avenue. As Chris pointed out, the property is non-conforming in many respects, namely the way that there's two principal structures on the lot. The property is non-conforming with regard to flood, and a number of other setback issues. The application this evening is an interesting one because you heard Chris go through the whole, is there an asterisk, is there not? You know, that's an interesting discussion to have from a legal perspective, but when I came in as part of the project and looked at it from a planning perspective, what Robert designed here, in my opinion, is the appropriate type of building and appropriately sized for the lot. So the site is a 5,000 square foot lot in the multifamily zone that permits a density of 2 units. Robert's proposing 2 units. Because it's only 2 units, it's not by your definitions, it's not considered a multifamily building, it's considered a 2-family building. There is a nuance or caveat or asterisk, if you want to, at the bottom of your zoning schedule that says for any single-family or 2-family building, regardless of the zone you're in, with us being in the MF zone, you're supposed to utilize the other criteria, which is a lesser coverage, a lesser or a more stringent setback requirement. But what Robert has designed here is, and we'll talk about the 3rd floor deck separately because it's kind of a separate little topic. What Robert has designed here is a building that is entirely in compliance with the zone that it sits in. The MF zone has a set of setback standards. This building complies with every one of those setback standards. The MF zone has a coverage requirement. This building complies with the coverage requirement. So the building he designed complies with the zone. If our client was fortunate enough to have a little more area on this lot and the ability to increase his density to 3 units, this becomes a by right application. It's kind of bizarre if you think about it. You're being penalized. You're in the multifamily zone, but you're being penalized by the fact that you're only building 2 units. It is something I think needs to be looked into from an ordinance perspective. But what we looked at is look at the surrounding uses, the surrounding buildings. Is this appropriate for the location, given the fact that we are complying with the intent of the coverage and the setbacks in the zone?
One quick question, John,
Where's that?
or statement.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You said this would be a fully variance-free application if you went directly to MF zone standards,
But for the 3rd floor deck.
but for the 3rd floor?
Agreed. Agreed.
Okay.
The
So-
The 3rd floor deck, yes.
Just-
And sorry, just bulk controls.
or 3rd floor?
3rd floor is not permitted in MF zone.
3rd floor.
3rd floor deck.
No.
3rd
No,
floor.
the 3rd floor in itself.
So it's not a variance-free application
Okay.
either way.
Go ahead.
You're saying the entire 3rd floor would not be permitted in the MF zone?
2 floors over parking, 2.5 stories over not parking.
That's it in the 2-family zone.
That's in the MF zone.
I'm sorry, you're saying if we apply the MF standards, the 3rd floor is not permitted?
Correct.
But we're not, right?
Well, you are, but you kind of aren't.
That's based on John's comment. I understand. Based on John's comment, I understand what you're saying.
So you're arguing you are, but now you're arguing you're not.
I mean,
We've been told that we're not.
we're being twisted, like, you know, we have a problem in the ordinance, but you're taking the ordinance and using it to your advantage.
I think it's
So-
just been as to the bulk controls, but I get
Right.
your point.
Okay.
Sorry, John.
That's all right. That's all right.
Did I mess you up?
So, all right, so let's back up a second. So, again, what we're talking about, and I'm not disagreeing with what Roger just said, but what we're talking about is the setbacks and the coverage that we're requesting in the MF zone versus what we are required to apply to this project. So the variances that are necessary with this application are side yard setback. Once we apply the required 37% of lot width with a minimum of 8 feet, we are proposing 8 feet on each side, so we are meeting the minimum on both sides of the building, but we are not meeting the combined requirement of 18.5 feet. at this specific piece of property, we believe it's an appropriate request because we have the Chuck Simon building, which is set back some great distance off of our property line, and we have the building to the, I'll say if you're facing the site to the left of us, that also has a nice setback. And Robert reported some of the distances between buildings of 28 feet and 17 feet 8 inches between the adjacent buildings. So while our combined side yard setback is 2.5 feet short of the requirement of the standard that we are required to apply, we think it's mitigated by the openness on either side of the building as the site sits today. With regard to building coverage, as I mentioned, the zone permits 45%. Every multifamily building that would be built in this zone that meets the density requirement is permitted to build a building at 45%. This site, because they're building a two-family building, is not permitted to build at 45%. If you look at the surrounding land uses, again, you have the commercial zone against us, you have a 2-unit building next to us, you have what I believe is a 4-unit building across the street from us. If you look at how those are laid out, they are pushing the envelope much greater than 30% all of those surrounding uses. So I think that the coverage that we are proposing is consistent with our surrounding uses and is obviously entirely consistent with the multifamily zone, being that is the requirement. The last variance is with regard to the third floor deck. The third floor decks have been discussion on many applications, and that variance has been granted many times. And I know this board has considered permitting third floor decks. And I believe there's still ongoing discussion about that. The key to third floor decks, in my opinion, from a planning perspective, is to make them integral to the structure, make them not so looming on the street, kind of hide them in the roof line so that you really only notice them being third floor decks when there's people standing on them. And I think that Robert has done a nice job with that in this design. It is kind of built into that front roof. There's a pent roof that goes along the front of it. You can see the front elevation here. Third floor decks have been permitted many times by this board. Obviously, this application stands on its own, but we believe that in a beachfront community such as the city of Margate, you permit a 2.5-story building. People naturally are looking for decks for that additional outdoor space to be able to enjoy the weather, especially in the summer months. So we believe that it is appropriate at this location. We believe that from an architectural standpoint, and a planning standpoint, Robert's done a nice job in the design, and it is a de minimis request. And I think a further mitigation of the request for the deck is, as Robert pointed out, the front yard setback. This building could have been pushed forward, but they chose to park in front of the building. So that third floor deck could have been much closer to the street. Robert has pushed the building back, so the third floor deck has even less impact as it would be looking over the street frontage.
And how about the distance between buildings? Does that play a role in that deck's impact of privacy?
It does. Looking toward the ocean, it's a commercial building. And then looking toward the bay, the fact that we're set back is obviously a help.
John, you mentioned that it kind of didn't make sense the way you'd be penalized with a duplex going down to 30% coverage when you then, for a triplex, jump up to 45 or a quad jump up to 45. In your experience, is that typically not what you see in terms of limiting controls or limiting bulk controls on multifamily buildings?
Yeah, we work in many communities, and many times what you see is the sliding scale is actually in the opposite direction of how Margate's ordinance currently sits. Typically speaking, ordinances on, especially on larger tracts of land, not necessarily smaller lots, but on larger tracts of land, when they start to permit you to increase density, they're generally looking for more open space. So typically the building coverage and the lot coverages go down when the density gets increased, because they're saying, okay, we're going to give you more density, but we want to see more open space as a result of that density. Margate's ordinance is actually the reverse of that. They give you more density as the number of units. I'm sorry, they give you more building coverage as the number of units go up. That's how your current ordinance is written. So if I have a 3-unit building, I can do 45%. If I have a 2-unit building, I only get to do 30%. From a planning perspective, it's not what you typically would see.
John, how big is the decks on the third floor?
I may need help from Rob.
13 by 13.
Chris, does the rest of the third floor meet the 50% requirement, even though it's not allowed here?
It does,
It does,
yes.
other than the deck?
It's half of the permitted second floor.
What is it called by? Actually, a little bit less.
Robert's saying approximately 12 by 14.
Per unit? Per
Comes
unit?
up 42 inches, yeah, forms the rail.
Yes. And I will point out, for those of you who looked at the property immediately across the street, in that contemporary style building, there is a third floor deck stuck into the, behind the stucco kind of, with it.
I think there's some confusion among the board members, because this attic plan. is what
Right,
you're
your
calling
plan
the
here
third floor.
says attic plan, but that's actually the third floor. The third floor plan calls for a 6 by 4'6" deck, which we
Robert,
thought was
Robert,
de minimis.
Are you listening?
Yeah.
But there's no dimension on the attic plan, and that's really where the oversized decks are. And you're putting an oversized deck on a third floor that really shouldn't be there in a neighborhood that doesn't support third floor decks. So you gotta really figure out, is it really worth that?
I hear you. What's it, show me the discrepancy, Tom?
The first floor has the parking area, the second floor is really the first floor.
Should be called the ground floor.
Yeah. And it's much larger. And it really doesn't belong.
That's the third floor.
So that thing that's not marked is 14 by 12, is that what they said?
It's the one above it.
Right, that's what I'm looking at, right here. That doesn't have any, the one down here has measurements on the first floor, or second floor. Yeah, that's the one we're talking about. I want to bring up about the third floor decks, and we are talking about it and seriously considering third floor decks everywhere, but we're also considering as part of that, if you want the third floor deck, it comes out of the 50%. Even if it doesn't, we're talking about small third floor decks set into roof lines.
Limited in size.
Limiting the size, this deck is pretty big. Yes, yes.
I can make it, like, this becomes an open deck, and then I just push it back that way.
Well, tell me, make it
Yeah.
small.
I can make the attic plan deck, I can make it smaller just by simply pushing it back to where it begins right above the bedrooms on the third floor right here. And I have to take 4
Rob.
feet off of it.
This board has been really working towards like 5 and 6 foot by 10 foot. So the third floor decks don't create a crowd of people. And not a congregational area where you could just go out and get some fresh air maybe.
Yeah,
So we're keeping them small,
Yeah, I
5 foot,
could-
6 foot
If
by.
you wanted 5, the depth
Yeah.
of 5 or 6 feet, it's not a problem.
That's what we've done with the last
I just
couple
changed the
ones.
roof line into it.
If
Push
you-
it back, yeah.
We will cut that depth of that deck in half.
Yeah. It just, this line right here can be pushed completely back right
Okay.
here.
Robert, what is the depth of it now?
Um,
You cut it back to 6.
Yeah. That's not a problem.
Thank you. John, you done? Yes. John, under the Municipal Land Use Act, do you believe that there are positive criteria that justify the 3 variances we are requesting?
Yes, I think that this is a case of a C2 type of variance request, where the benefits of the deviation outweigh the potential detriments. What Robert has designed here, the additional coverage that's requested and the combined setback issues, this combined setback that's being requested allows him to develop, we think, a more aesthetically pleasing, a nicer unit. It allows him to develop a unit that is a townhouse style of unit, which is, become, I'm gonna say the I hate to use the word the norm, but it's a more pleasing look. It's a more single-family type of look. And for those reasons, we believe that Robert has created a more desirable visual environment, which is the purpose of zoning that is advanced with the application. Also, Robert, although we are requesting a side yard setback variance, we are meeting the minimums on both of the sides. We are meeting the front and the rear yard setbacks. So I believe that that while we're asking for a deviation, that we have preserved air, light, and open space with the application, so we believe that the positive criteria is established.
And with respect to negative criteria, whether the variance can be granted without substantial detriment to the public good, without substantially impairing the intent and purpose of the zone plan?
With regard to the intent and purpose of the zone plan, as I started, we're in an MF zone, and the MF zone standards permit 45%, which is what was designed. They permit 8-foot side yards, which is what was designed, and the MF zone does not have a combined side yard setback requirement. So we believe that it meets the intent and purpose of the zone plan and the zoning ordinance. And with regard to a negative impact or substantial negative impact to the public good, this fits right in with the character of the neighborhood. This is a kind of a transitional type of lot because it does abut the commercial zone. So we believe that what's been designed on this lot is very much appropriate and will not have a negative impact. Robert's provided the parking that's required. He's meeting the height that's required.
As to the negative criteria, does the elimination of the non-conforming structure, the non-conforming duplex, also fall into your analysis?
Yes, it does.
That's all I have. I have a couple comments to make before I sit down.
I'm sorry. say
That's all I
that
have
again.
for testimony. I just have a couple comments to finish up on what I was saying at the beginning. That I'm still not convinced that we was intending to go to the two-family criteria, because carrying that analysis a little bit further, the two-family criteria provides for a 3,200 square foot lot size. And it doesn't have a minimum square foot requirement for a unit. So I can take a 3,200 square foot lot under this analysis and build a duplex. I don't think that was ever the intent. Moreover, there's no density requirement in the two-family zone, and there's no floor area ratio requirement, which controls the size of the building in the two-family zone. So I don't know what the intent was or what was trying to be done at that point. I don't think it was to go to a two-family zone zoning, because that's more detrimental if you're gonna let me put a duplex on a 3,200 square foot lot.
But that's what it was before the asterisk was removed?
Yes, it's always been that way.
Yes, that's the argument, but that's the argument, yes, that's.
But I'm saying that's what it was. It wasn't a mistake. That's what
Well,
what
it
was.
says once it said go to the chart to the above.
Right.
Once it said go to the chart to the left. Now it says go to the left. It's a single family zone. So
Okay.
I just looked at it closer now because of this than I ever have, and that's where I come out.
Chris,
Yes.
Galantino. I need a couple things.
Yes.
First of all, I need a non-conversion agreement for the area below the base flood elevation finished first floor.
Okay.
Also,
You have that form, right? You got-
yes, can you remove the bonus area? There is no such thing as a bonus room
It should be called storage, all right?
storage. Thank you.
The answer is yes, Leo. You got that?
The bonus area?
It's actually a storage area.
Yeah, I have a question for Robert. On the parking garage, Robert, the elevator box comes out somewhat.
Yes.
So it kind of leaves you 15 feet inside the garage.
Now, there's,
From the inside wall of the garage to the elevator box, it's
6.
It's 15 feet from the front to the inside.
the garage door's 10 feet wide, pull the car in.
Garage is 10 feet wide, the garage door?
Yes, 10 feet wide garage door. It's a 10-foot wide garage door.
How long's an average car? Anybody know?
18
What?
feet.
How long?
Well, it
The
depends.
the car itself.
15 feet, 14 feet,
Well, that's all you have, is 15 feet, and you bump the elevator.
but you got 10-6 in between.
That means you gotta go in your garage and turn?
It's legal spot.
If you have to go in your garage and turn, you're not using the garage, is what I'm saying.
Still a legal spot.
If you go in and have to turn your
We need-
car
we need
inside.
Wait, we need 9 feet. We need 9 foot width regardless of whatever
It's
protrusions
10-6.
are, and I believe we have it.
When you go-
10-6.
When you go straight in, it's just that elevator box protrudes.
You know what, you hit your head on that is what you do with that. I do, anyway.
But Chris, you have a whole bottom floor where you could push the elevator box back and have free space in the garage. I mean, you have those two big bonus rooms that aren't.
My concern is,
I'm just telling you.
One at a time, guys, one at a time.
You need a storage area, should push it into?
Right, we should move that back so it's free and clear and you have free and
Because-
clear parking, otherwise they're not gonna use it.
if the garage is not usable, then it's not a valid parking spot. And we're counting that as one space for 4 bedrooms in one side of a duplex,
Agreed, and the
Right.
dimensions aren't there even with the elevator box.
to fit a car.
Yeah, a conforming parking space,
The legal
a legal parking space.
9 by 18, correct?
Yes,
And you have that.
10-6.
10-6.
You got 10-6
Robert,
in there.
you're
Right up against the entrance
It's 15 feet.
Mr. Collins suggested that you could actually push it toward the storage space and free that area up.
But then it goes upstairs too.
Yeah, then it's killing the bathroom.
You know, if the next floor is up, but.
Robert, will you make sure that you have a 9 by 18?
I'll show a parking space there that is 9 feet by 20 feet.
Yeah, well, I don't want to see a parking where a car has to come in and turn away from something and then it's not usable. That's all I'm saying.
Craig, we'll show a conforming parking space diagram in that garage.
I can slide
I'm gonna sit down now.
Slide it overboard.
Yeah, there's plenty of room. This is wider than.
It'll fit.
So it fits.
I'll show it. Yeah, there's garage door up in here.
That's a good answer. If you can lose the look of the house. That's what they're gonna do.
Craig, what was that?
We measured it. I measured it with Frank. There's room for a car.
Either way,
there's
we'll
room
show
for
that,
a
we'll
car.
show it 9 by 18 or 9 by 20 space in the garage.
We sat there.
You just put an 8 foot, this gives you more room, gives you easement to the elevator.
But it really-
Then we're talking.
Where's the scale?
Hey, Craig,
Yes, Tom.
he just scaled it and it overlaps it by a foot.
Everything needs to be on the record.
We need a foot, Tom?
Mr. Palmisano,
overlaps it
Mr.
by a
Collins,
foot.
Robert,
everything needs to be on the record. Talk one at a time.
help me out here. You will provide a 9 by 18 space in the garage, not interfered with by the elevator.
Correct. I'll slide the garage door over a foot. Yeah. I can do an 8-foot door garage door too.
Okay? Thank you. Thank you, Clem.
What?
Move his garage door over, and I can move this over.
Doesn't it screw up the rest of the house? Second and third floor.
He's got plenty.
Just for clarification purposes, I just sketched it. If Robert just extends that wing wall a hair, cuts this back a hair, he's got a full 10 foot by the whole length of the garage, and it works fine.
We should,
Just moving the walls in the front of the house a little bit, yeah. Just move the door over.
Barely even 12 inches,
Yeah.
not even 12 inches.
Okay. And that doesn't affect anything else in the house, correct?
No.
Right.
Door over, as a suggestion, gives you the full space, plain plans. I'm done, Mr. Chair, I'm done.
So the driveway location changes?
No. Oh,
And the width of the driveway is okay for that, Robert?
Yeah.
Yes, it will.
It would slide apart slightly.
so what does that do if the driveway goes over?
You're gonna create a bigger space.
So just, Mr. Balanson too, just for the record, because
Is there room here?
I just, in this area here, this third floor deck, I'm not so sure it fits the neighborhood of the building. And basically, forget the fact that there shouldn't be a third floor, but you have a third floor. Now you're asking us for a third floor deck that's larger than the second floor deck. So if you're gonna at least do it, it should be at least,
It's back to 6 feet.
second floor deck is 4 foot 6 inches.
You want to have.
I'm just saying, I don't think it should be there at all. I think you're just asking for trouble. I don't think it gains anything to the property. I don't know if you're gonna do a separate vote on this, but that's up to you.
Tom, what are you saying? I understand. What are you saying, Tom? No, but you're saying. The deck is bigger than the deck below.
You're saying do it totally and then eliminate that deck, or you're just saying?
Isn't the third floor not permitted whatsoever?
Board, the discussion needs to be in the microphones,
The third floor
one at a time.
is
Go
not
ahead.
permitted in the MF zone.
Third floor is
So
not
the third-
permitted anywhere
Third
except,
floor is permitted. If
In
it's
the
not-
MF
If you
zone.
park outside.
oh, the third floor deck or the third floor?
Third floor is permitted if you park outside.
If you don't have,
If you don't, if
but
you're not over
this
parking.
has
Third floor is permitted.
parking underneath.
But you have parking underneath,
We have a garage.
so it's not permitted in that instance.
2 spaces
Right.
outside and the garage, yes.
But why should the deck be eliminated, or the third floor be eliminated? What were you saying, Tom?
I'm saying the deck should be
What?
smaller than 6 feet.
Because of the circumstances, technically or whether it should or shouldn't, it really probably shouldn't have a third floor, but because of the technicalities, we're saying it's okay, okay? But when we do a third floor.
We're
we
not
do
saying it's
50
okay, we're saying it's gonna be a variance.
For the deck.
Well, wouldn't the third floor have to be a variance too?
No,
No,
because we
because-
refer into the two-family zone, which permits it.
Oh, okay.
And
So
don't,
it's the semantics thing.
Got it.
So we're in an area now where we're putting a third floor on, that's fine. But now, third floors are 50% of the floor below it.
Correct.
And now we're asking for a variance to put a third floor deck on.
Correct.
Which really shouldn't be, but it's gonna be bigger than the deck below it. It should be half the size of the deck below it, just like the board.
the deck below is like 4.5 feet or something.
Right,
It's
or the
it's still
same
gonna be,
size as the
now
deck
it's gonna be
below.
about 10
That's what I
feet
was
back.
saying.
And
I don't,
Don't
go ahead.
finish.
I understand what you're
something you may
saying.
wanna look at with the third floor over parking, not over parking, our first floor is 10 feet off the ground, no matter what, parking or no parking. So that should enter into an analysis of whether or not you're gonna have a third floor or not, because parking underneath doesn't push the building up.
What's the grade elevation there?
Mike, we're about 10 feet off the ground. The
No, and that's what, I mean, would you have to be 10 feet off the ground if you weren't parking there?
Yes, no, that's what I'm saying. The answer is yes.
'Cause I know it's low there, so what's the grade elevation there, 5?
Great.
No, the grade elevation's lower, the grade elevation's close to 4.
4?
4, approximately.
And you have to be at 13, Roger?
Well, that's 9 feet, and how much do you have, 10 feet?
So we're like 9, 10, it's gonna be that high anyway, whether I have parking or not, was my point.
Chris, I think if you didn't, I think that only came into play in your favor if you raise it from what it was supposed to be. If you don't have to raise it from what it's supposed to be, then it shouldn't apply.
I agree with that. I think,
But have you had to raise it a foot to comply, or?
Robert said the first floor is where it's supposed to be. I don't know if it's a foot off.
Elevation's 13, elevation.
I'm asking you to help me out here. Is the first floor where it's required to be, or did you push it up a little higher?
No, the first floor is where it's required to be.
The first floor is where it should be, and just by chance, there's room for cars underneath?
Yes. I could do a thin slab. I
No,
could go-
no, I just want to know that. You didn't go up higher than, to create the garage?
No.
Because we allow that, but you didn't have to take advantage of that.
On the survey, there's an elevation of 4.24. BFE's at 14, so he's right.
Yeah.
It works either way.
Right, thank you.
What are we doing about the attic decks?
Mike, it's getting cut back to 6 feet.
6 feet.
6 feet.
6 feet?
If the board prefers a second vote on that, that's fine.
I don't think so. All right, any more questions from the board? Is there anyone from the public that would like to comment or have any questions? Public portion is closed. Any further comments or from the board? If not, Leo, would you read a motion, please?
Someone needs to make a motion for C variance relief for the following: combined yard setback of 16.33 feet where 18.5 feet is required, building coverage variance of 45% where 30% is the permitted maximum, and a variance to permit the third floor deck where third floor decks are not permitted in this area. The conditions will be that the depth of the third floor decks will be reduced from about 13 feet to 6 feet. Applicant will supply a non-conversion agreement for all space below BFE. The applicant will remove that bonus area shown on the plans, and that's a storage area, so it'll be relabeled. And they'll move the garage doors as represented during the course of the hearing so that the driveway and the cars don't interfere with the elevator. And all other representations made during the course of the hearing are set forth in Mr. McLaren's report of August 29th, 2019.
I would.
It's a depth of 6, and it's
Tom,
the
I think you switched.
All right.
the depth.
Can I make a motion? Or wait?
Wait,
6 feet.
I
Deck
don't know
six
how
foot,
wa-
6 foot deep,
It's 6 feet deep. I don't know how wide it is because there's
13.
13, so it's 13
as shown.
as shown.
So we ready for a motion?
Yes.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Tom Collins?
Very confusing, very in-depth. Robert, I think you did a great job. It's a beautiful concept. As you can tell, I like everything except the third floor deck. And except for the third floor deck, I would vote yes, but I have to vote no because I just don't think that it belongs in that neighborhood. I don't think it enhances the neighborhood, and I think it has nothing but negative impacts on the surrounding neighbors and neighbors, because if you have parties and things, it's just gonna interrupt. It's just something that's just not needed, so I just can't vote for it.
Clem Osleski?
My feelings are very similar to Tom's. I have no problem with the combination side yards. That's a strange requirement anyhow, when each side yard meets the requirements, and yet the total of the two don't meet the required total. We have to look into that. And the coverage situation, there's obviously a lot of confusion, which hopefully we can straighten out. But the bottom line, I think, having 2 units on the site instead of 3 units is certainly an advantage, should be considered in the positive. But the third floor deck, even a smaller one, we don't permit them, and I don't see any reason that this should be allowed. I haven't heard any justification for it under the testimony, so I have to vote in the negative.
Rich Patterson?
Well, I was going to say that the applicant and architect took advantage of the multifamily area in some aspects and took advantage of the two-family in other aspects, but I was wrong because you're already at that level, so. Forgetting all that, looking where the property is, if you added 2 feet on the side yard on the Simon building, what difference would it make? You've got that huge commercial building on that side. So I think in this particular case, that side yard setback doesn't matter. The second thing on the side yard setback, I agree with the architect that it is offset by a bigger front yard, which is more green space, more pleasing. I had a problem with a 13 by 13 foot deck by cutting it in half or more than half. I don't. It's something that I know is coming, and to say we don't allow it when it's going to be allowed, I don't agree with. So also having 2 families instead of more families, I am consistently trying to get less density in town. So I think it is a good application. For those reasons, I approve the application.
Mike Cristaldi?
In agreement with Rich, in agreement with Mr. Patterson, we're getting a new compliant building. We got 3 units there now. We're cutting them down to 2. It's a good-looking building compared to what we're looking at now. The coverage thing doesn't bother me a bit. The deck, I'm not crazy about, but as a fireman once told me, it's a great way to get a guy down. So being a smaller deck, I vote yes on the application.
Jim Galantino?
I look at it this way. They're moving the house to the back of the lot. They're giving us a flood compliant structure. And like Rich said, the right side of the building, the ocean side, is right next to that complex. I wouldn't want to live there with the way that any closer, or I don't know what you're going to do there. That's just a tough call. Nice trees, I guess. As to the third floor deck, I agree with Rich on that. I think eventually the board is moving in that direction, and I can, why create a hardship on that? And on that note, I approve it, yes.
Craig Palmisano?
Well, it's a very tough case for me because I'm one that likes to reduce density as much as possible. I'd like to see one house there. I would like to see one house there. But this lot is not appropriate for a single home. With a commercial aspect right next door, I think it calls for a duplex there. The side yard setback, I don't have a problem with the combined side yard. The smaller deck is what we want, smaller decks, nothing real big on third floors. And, like I said, it's appropriate for the spot, I approve it.
Mike Richmond?
Even with the increased lot coverage, it's still a huge lot, and there's still a lot of room there. The 8 feet setbacks, I think, are more than enough. And just like a few other board members said, we're going to allow third-story decks. And 6 feet is not a lot of deck space to have a party. I mean, I'm sure some people will, but it's a new point because we're going to allow it sooner than later, so I'm going to vote yes.
Application passes 5-2.
Thank you all very much. Sorry for the confusion.
Okay.
Thank you.
Always
Next case is
Chris?
Dennis and Kimberly Forte, 400 North Quincy Avenue, Block 618, Lot 46, in the S40 district to grant C variance relief for front yard, side yard setback, and possibly others. Taxes and water are current, and proof of advertising and notifying is satisfied. Mr. McLarnon?
Thank you, Board Chairman, board members.
Excuse me, can we take this outside, please? Chris, and sign. Thank you.
400 North Quincy.
In regard to the application of Dennis Forte, 400 North Quincy Avenue, Block 618, Lot 46, within the S40 zone. It's in the elevation 8 effective firm, flood map zone. They're requesting C variances, and it's a planning and zoning report. It's considered a hardship variance and a substantial benefit variance. The hardship is because it is a corner lot. There's 2 front yards and 2 side yards. The background is as follows. The applicant is seeking relief from the ordinance of the City of Margate in order to construct an addition to an existing older single-family dwelling on North Quincy Avenue at Fremont Avenue within the S40 zoning district. The addition will be subject to the substantial improvement rule in effect in Chapter 145 of the Flood Damage Prevention Ordinance. Several existing nonconformities exist and proposed to be expanded, therefore requiring additional zoning variances. Zoning chart is on page 2. Documents reviewed on the bottom of page 2. Page 3 indicates the variances identified. The first one is a front yard setback to the porch along Quincy Avenue, whereas the front yard setback along Quincy Avenue is the prevailing front yard setback, which is 6.6 feet, 4.9 feet exists, and 4.9 feet is proposed, an expansion of a vertical expansion of a non-conforming setback.
Is that what you mean when you say they're being expanded because it's going up?
Correct.
Okay, nothing's going up.
They're not, it's a vertical expansion, so they
Right.
have this
It's not going
non-conforming-
further than anything they currently have.
Right,
Outward, just up.
just upward.
Okay.
We can look at X, Y, Z. Front yard setback for the principal structure, Quincy Avenue, whereas the front yard setback along Quincy Avenue for principal building is 15.1 feet, 14.9 feet exists, and 14.9 feet is proposed, therefore requiring a variance due to the same reasons. Minimum side yard setback, whereas the minimum side yard setback for lot width is 47 feet, because it's a corner lot, is 5 feet, 0.2 feet, and 3.1 feet exists, and 3.1 feet is proposed. The 0.2 foot is the smallest of the portion, but the part that's being expanded upon is the 3.1 foot. And again, it's an expansion of a vertical non-conforming setback. Minimum combined side yard setback, whereas a minimum side yard setback for lot width of 47 feet, again, corner lot is 17.4 feet,
.6 feet is the total combined side yard setback. 3.5 feet exists, and 3.5 feet is the conforming setback of the 3.5 feet combined side yard setback. Again, you're not expanding where it's at its smallest, you're expanding at the next smallest. Still requires a variance. Building coverage, whereas the permitted building coverage is 36% maximum, 43% exists, and due to expansion of the second floor over once open land is greater than 43%. Again, the architect will have to provide that information, but it is a variance. Waiver is requested. No waiver has been requested. However, I suggest that they submit or request a waiver from submitting the checklist that is required. Otherwise, horrible things could happen. Comments. The front yard setbacks are being expanded and increasing the nonconformity. Again, my comments 1 through 5 basically just regurgitate what I just said. Both the C1 and C2 criteria need to be satisfied in this application due to the requirements of a corner lot. Parking for off-street parking spaces meets or exceeds the required standards. Again, the structure is almost 5 feet below the required first floor level, and the addition is, again, subject to the flow damage prevention ordinance in regard to substantial improvement values. Again, you can see that my recommendations in section 6, all landscape requirements shall be met, and testimony shall be provided as to how the benefits of increasing a wall 3.5 feet away, when it's supposed to be 5 feet, outweighs any detriments. And that concludes my report at this time.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, board members. My name is Christopher Facenda. I'm an attorney in Northfield, New Jersey. I'm here tonight with Mr. Dennis Forte and Peter Weiss. Mr. Forte is the owner of the property at issue, 400 North Quincy Avenue. Mr. Weiss, as you all know, is a registered architect here in the state of New Jersey who has appeared before this board on multiple occasions. Mr. Forte owns the property at 400 North Quincy Avenue, which is on the corner of Quincy and Fremont Avenues. It's known as Lot 46 in Block 618. Property is 47 by 80 and consists of 3,760 square feet. It is located in the S40 zoning district, which permits residential uses. The current use of the property is, in fact, residential. As Mr. McLarnon indicated, we're here tonight seeking variance relief in order to construct, establish, and maintain a needed addition to an older single-family residence for a family actually returning to Margate City to live year-round. The renovation is comprised of an expansion of an existing second floor to include a new bathroom, new master bedroom and bathroom, and a permanent rooftop to cover an existing porch, which is currently covered by an awning. The renovation triggers a few variances due to the upward or vertical expansion of the building and some pre-existing non-conforming conditions. Those variances include 2 front yard setbacks for the building and the porch due to the fact that it is in fact a corner lot, 2 side yard setbacks for the building and the porch, and building coverage. Mr. Weiss will certainly explain the architectural plan in more detail and the extent of the variances. We also would request from this board tonight a waiver from the variance checklist as noted in Mr. McLarnon's report. And with that, if we could swear Mr. Forte and Mr. Weiss.
Sure, just each of you state your name and business address or home address for the record. I'll swear you in together.
Sure. Dennis Forte, 400 North Quincy Avenue.
Peter Weiss, 101 North Washington Avenue.
And do you each swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth?
Yes.
Thanks.
Mr. Weiss, you've already provided your name and address for the record. You're a registered architect in the state of New Jersey?
Yes.
Okay. And you prepared the architectural elevation and floor plans for the Forte residence that's on file before the board tonight?
Yes.
And with that, are you familiar with the site?
Yes.
Okay. Are you familiar with the surrounding properties in the neighborhood?
Yes.
And you're also familiar with Margate City zoning ordinance?
Yes.
Okay. Can you describe the property as it's currently configured in terms of location, size, current configuration, existing non-conforming conditions?
Okay, the lot is currently occupied by a single-family home. It's a split level. You enter basically at grade, it goes up a few steps to the living space, and then to the left, it goes up half a flight of stairs to the bedroom areas. The house is set back on the lot, meaning it's pushed towards the north side, so it has a very large front yard, but as a result, it's got a fairly narrow yard on the north side. So what we propose to do is, since it's only a 3-bedroom house now, we'd like to expand or add a second floor over the existing living space, which is on the right side, which would be accessed from a stair going from the left side. And in that addition, we propose a bedroom suite, master bedroom suite, which will bring it up to 4 bedrooms. The existing second floor is about 3 foot from the rear, well, the side property line on the north side. So our hope was to carry that line straight, across the back, if you will, maintain that setback. On the Quincy Avenue side, the existing first floor encroaches into the setback by a couple inches, so of course we want to try to line that up, but that's de minimis. And there was a question about the coverage. So there's a small area which I kind of even forgot about in the back right corner, which would be extra coverage, but it's only 21 square feet.
Could you show us where that is? That was my question. Where?
Just this little area here,
For the porch?
right here, yes. So that amounts to about 0.5% of coverage.
Oh, you have it marked there with the lines? I see. This here?
This has some numbers on it, yes.
The extra building coverage.
Okay.
Yeah, so everything else is, there's no other building coverage being added.
Pete, like, here, Galantino. So roughly, just how many square feet do you think you're adding to the addition? You usually put it on your sheet.
Uh-huh.
Thought it was on there.
Well, it's 21 by 26 and a half. So that's 500, give or take.
46 feet and a half?
I'm sorry,
46 and a half feet? Or 26 and a half feet?
26 and a half front to back,
Right.
almost 21 left to right.
So 21 times 6?
That's 20.
No.
So it's probably 500 square feet plus. Also, as part of the application, there's a side porch on the Quincy Avenue side that has a awning on it right now. So we wish to add a permanent roof over it. The existing porch encroaches into the setback by like 2.6 feet. And has a setback of 4.9, so it's still an inch into the minimum setback of 5 feet that you frequently mention. So in order to put a roof on, of course, the porch is there, so we would, we want to cover the whole thing, so creates a variance for the setback for the roof. Now you could argue, I would argue that the columns are going to be set back a little bit, so in theory, it would meet a 5-foot setback because the porch, is 4.9. We'd be back a couple inches, so we'll be at least 5 feet to the columns holding up the roof.
Okay. And Peter, just for confirmation for the board, the front yard and side yard setbacks, they're not changing on the first floor, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and essentially the variances that we're requesting today are needed because of the vertical expansion or the vertical renovation of the building?
They're the result of, yes, the existing footprint of the building and the location of the building on the lot.
Okay, and you mentioned the fact that the existing location is what it is. Because the lot's on a corner, are you trying to work with the building in its current location? Is that creating some of the problems with respect to the existing non-conforming conditions?
Yes.
Okay. And again, you're staying within the outermost vertical footprint of the structure as it is today, correct?
Correct.
And so there's no horizontal expansion?
Correct.
Okay. For that reason, do you think, is it your opinion that the C1 hardship variance can be granted by this board tonight?
Yes.
Okay. We've also can establish that the C2 variance criteria can be advanced, correct?
Yes.
Okay, in your opinion, given the fact that we're staying within the outermost vertical footprint of the property, are you preserving adequate light, air, and open space?
Yes.
And is this an appropriate location for residential use?
Yes.
In fact, the entire surrounding neighborhood is residential in nature, correct?
Yes.
And the renovation of an older existing single-family home with the beautiful plans that you've put forth before the board today, in your opinion, does that represent a desirable visual environment?
Yes.
And having shown that we can advance the positive criteria, we must also satisfy the negative criteria. In your opinion, do the requested variances substantially impair the intent and purpose of the zone plan or zoning ordinance?
No.
Do they substantially impact the public good in any way?
No.
That's all I have for Mr. Weiss,
Oh,
unless
I
he
have
wants
more.
to. Go ahead.
So I just want to point out, there was some mention of the porch on the side porch for the house to the north. So I went over and measured it. Our addition would be approximately 19 feet from the house to the north, the existing house, and we'd be about 12 feet to the existing porch. So there's a fairly substantial space even between our proposed addition and the existing porch. I think that may have been a driveway at one time, so it's a fair amount of space. So, you know, this zone, well, these lots, if you were to develop these new, would each have a 5-foot setback. So the ordinance would basically permit 10 feet between the buildings. And we're saying that, well, we'd have 12 feet to the porch and 19 feet to the building. So that's not, I mean, it's not on the site plan, but that's, if you drove by the site, you would have seen that. Also, you know, naturally, as part of the project, we're reciting the whole building, so that's an aesthetic enhancement. Correct. I'm talking about the porch next door. Next door, there's a porch. Correct.
And Pete, do you want to?
Pardon me, Clem?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Clem, I didn't hear what you said.
Say it again.
The porch is not being enlarged, it's just being roofed.
Thank you.
And Pete, very quickly, do you want to describe for the board some of the architectural enhancements to the exterior of the building, given the fact that it's an older, single-family residence?
Well, I did. We're going to reside the whole building. So, I mean, we can't really match the siding that's there with the addition, so we're going to reside it, yes.
There's a large tree out front.
Yep,
That might have to be trimmed a little bit, but not removed,
correct.
right?
Yeah, we'll cut a couple branches off, though. Keep it-
Yeah.
Will we make a condition that that tree not be removed?
Sure.
Make that a condition? Okay.
Hear that?
I have just a quick question, but it involves Mr. McLaren. In your comments, you put under number 2 that the side yard setback is just like 17 inches off for a variance. Are you talking about
That's the actual variance.
is 17 inches there? Is that correct?
Item number 2.
Yep. Under your comments, page 3, bottom. Are you talking that, because it's a corner lot, I'm confused. Are you talking, is that the 4.7 inches to the existing deck?
It's the wall. That's it. 3.5 foot setback, so the variance is 1.5 feet.
Okay, got it.
Anything else for Mr. Weiss? All right, and very quickly, I'll ask Denny to stand up. Denny, you actually grew up in Margate, correct?
Yes.
Could you have a microphone, please?
You lived here from approximately 1973 to 83?
Yes,
And your family moved to Pennsylvania?
yes,
And ultimately, as you got older, you eventually bought your home in Mantua, is that right?
correct,
Okay, but you've summered here the last 5 years?
correct,
You recently sold your house in Mantua?
correct.
And why did you do that?
To relocate full-time down here.
You'll be here, and can you describe for the board who you live with? You married?
My wife and 2 children, yep.
And just because you brought it up, Did you go 2 for 3 against Hamilton in 1984 in the
I did.
District 16 Finals?
I did.
Approved.
Wait a minute, who pitched that game?
That's right.
Yes, sir.
The fancy F on your storm door, did that come with the house?
No. Did it come with the house? No.
Because a man whose last name began with F used to live there too.
Oh, okay.
I
Yeah,
wondered
yeah.
if that enticed you to buy it.
No, no.
Okay.
My wife bought it.
Tony Todd? That's Dave Fitzsimmons.
Who's that?
Yeah, that was my wife's purchase. Thank you.
That's all I have for Mr. Forte, if you'd like to ask him any other questions. If not, we rest. We appreciate your time and attention, and we'd ask for you to approve these variances.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? If anyone here from the public with questions or comments? Oh, wait 1 second. Do you agree with all, on page 5 of Roger's report, do you agree with all that B
Like the
through H?
landscape requirements and all the other permits. No problem.
Yeah, we have no problem with any of the comments.
All right. Back to the public portion. If anyone would like to make a comment or question, public portion is closed. If the board has no further comments, would you
Yes, someone needs.
read a motion?
Yeah, someone needs to make a motion for C variance relief for the following variances. Front yard setback to the porch on Quincy Avenue of 4.9 feet or 6.6 feet is required. Front yard setback to the principal structure along Quincy Avenue of 14.9 feet or 15.1 feet is required. A side yard setback of 3.1 feet or 5 feet is required. A minimum combined yard setback of 3.5 feet where 17.4 feet is required. And a building coverage variance of, well, probably a little more than 43%. Mr. Weiss's testimony was that he added about 21 square feet to building coverage. So as a percentage, I'm not sure what that is, but if you,
Approximately 0.5%.
so 43.5% approximately, or 36% is the permitted maximum. And a waiver from having to submit an application checklist. The conditions will be that they'll maintain that existing tree. And they've indicated on the record that they've agreed with all the comments and conditions.
Trees.
That they'll maintain the existing tree, correct?
Trees.
Trees, oh, how many are there?
2 or 3.
2 or 3, okay. That they'll maintain the existing trees on the property, and they've indicated on the record that they agree with all the comments and conditions set forth in Mr. McLaurin's report. And that's it, someone needs to make that motion.
I'll make that motion.
Tried to beat him out. I'll second.
Tom Collins?
Much easier case, much nicer house.
I just,
It's a very de minimis, you're not adding that many square feet. I'm sure, just from looking at your house today and looking at the pictures, that, you know, you take very good care of your house. I think this will be an asset to the neighborhood. Being on a corner lot is obviously a penalty to you. But I think the way you've presented this, I think it's going to be really a nice enhancement. I see no negatives to the neighborhood, and I vote in favor.
Clem Oseski?
It's so good to see a nice existing home preserved rather than knocked down. And nicely enlarged to provide the family's needs. We sure can use as much of this approach in Margate as possible. I vote to approve.
Rich Patterson?
I think the coverage variance is de minimis. The setback variances, I do have a problem with older houses that are close to the property line expanding up. It's inconvenience to the party next door. But I don't think it's enough in this case to matter. This is a second floor going up. It's not a third floor that we've had in the past, which creates a 40-foot, 38-foot wall or whatever. This is just a second floor, so I have to consider that doesn't matter. Other than that, I agree with Tom and Clem and gladly approve this application.
Mike Cristaldi?
I agree with Mr. Patterson, but we could get something thrown in aside, be a 5-bedroom, 42 feet in the air. Now we've got a nice house on the lot that conforms with Margate. I think you did a great job on this. Good luck with the project. I vote yes.
Jim Galantino?
Don't forget 6 bedrooms, because they always add a library in there somewhere. No bonus rooms. Don't mention that. That's okay. I agree with Rich again. Rich is on the ball tonight. I don't know. He must have ate some spinach or something this morning or whatever.
I had a few beers before the meeting.
Beers? You invite me. Chris did a good job presenting the case and showed that there's no harm. If the neighbor was going to be affected on the like that side, he would have came and voiced an opinion. And since that didn't come, I don't think it creates much of a hardship. So I vote yes.
Margaret Gubernalty?
I think I agree with the other board members as well. I think the hardship would be that it is a corner lot. There are existing non-conforming conditions. We're merely putting a second floor on a already really nice property. It's an aesthetic improvement to the property. I see no negative impact to the public. It looks really nice, and welcome back to Margate. I approve.
Mike Richmond?
Yeah, I agree with all the other board members. I really think it's a de minimis variance. We're still maintaining that 3 feet around the property for safety, and I think it's a nice addition to the neighborhood, so I'm going to vote yes.
Application passes 7-0.
Thank you all very much. Have a great evening.
Next case is Andrew Perry, 111 South Quincy Avenue, Block 17, Lot 6, in the S40 district to grant... Excuse me? Mr. Crisaldi, are you reading the case? What's that mean? Okay.
Oh, it's in Never Never Land? Is it in Never Never Land?
Roger, I have those surveys if you want. I don't know if it's necessary, but.
Yes.
So you have them on record. Actually, Hannah will take one for the...
Okay, we're going to start again. This is Andrew Perry, 111 South Quincy Avenue, Block 17, Lot 6, in the S40 district to grant C variance relief for rear yard setback and possibly others. Taxes and water are current, and proof of advertising and notifying is satisfied. Mr. McLarnon?
Yes, Board Chairman, board members, thank you. This report is based on the application of Andrew Perry, 111 South Quincy Avenue, Block 17, Lot 6, within the S40 zoning district. FEMA zone elevation 10, based on the effective firm. This is a substantial benefit variance. The background is as follows. The applicant is seeking relief from the ordinances of the City of Margate in order to construct an addition to a single-family dwelling within the S40 zoning district. The site is located within the beach block on the east side of the street, or the Atlantic City side. The request is for a few variances that are, actually one variance, that are expansions of a non-conforming setback. The property is subject to the substantial improvement requirements of the city's flood damage prevention ordinance, Chapter 145. I doubt that'll be affected in this property.
What's the value of the property?
I'm not going to guess. The expansion involves a second-floor expansion covering the existing footprint of the floor below, which actually reduces the third-floor half-story percentage. The rear yard setbacks are being encroached upon, further requiring the variance. The detached garage is considered attached as it is structurally connected to the principal building and is to be included in the building coverage calculations. The side yard setbacks are also taken to the garage on the right side, otherwise the combined side yards would more than comply, even though the variance is not required. Zoning chart is on page 2. Documents reviewed on page 3. The one variance identified, and I agree with,
is the rear yard setback to the building, whereas a minimum of 16 feet rear yard setback is required. 6.79 feet exists and 6.79 feet is proposed. Rounding up to 6.8 feet, it doesn't mean anything. Again, it's an expansion of a non-conforming condition. 2 waivers have been requested. One is a copy of an area map showing all lots within 200 feet of the property. The tax map sheet in my report satisfies that requirement. And the second one is a survey that's older than 1 year old. The survey, that the property has not changed. Mr. Goldstein will be supplying an updated survey to the board tonight if the board requests it. Otherwise, it'll be part of the application for compliance review. This is not a hardship application. All the existing non-conforming setbacks are just existing non-conforming, other than the rear yard setback. No other ones are being affected. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. McLaren, Eric Goldstein on behalf of the applicants, Andrew and Lanny Perry. This is the type of case that I'm really happy to bring to the board because it's a saving and adding on to a historic house that's maybe one of the nicest homes in Margate. And when the Perrys started to get a little older, their kids were getting older, their family is growing, they had some options with regard to this lot, which, as you know, is oversized at 75 by 80 in the Parkway section near the beach on Quincy Avenue. One option, we met with the city years ago, was to demolish and try to build something new. One option was to maybe even raise it. None of that really made sense. What they wanted to do was keep the historic character of the property and just add on. So over time, they had a couple of different ideas for development, and ultimately, Mark Asher's office, Asher Sloan-White, put together a plan that we brought to Roger to take a look at to try to keep as much of the character of the house present as in the future it will look like it looks now, just with kind of a small addition. And we do consider this a small addition. Nothing's really dramatic at all. And as Roger pointed out in his report, all of which is correct, it's the expansion of an existing nonconformity with regard to setbacks. So what do we have with regard to the application? We've got an existing home that's been maintained fairly impeccably over time. We've got an Asher design to add as much character of the house as possible, but without changing any of the streetscape. Clearly, what we're going to propose isn't really even obvious or visible from the street. And based on what Mr. Patterson had asked Mr. McLaren regarding the substantial improvement rule, the assessment of the house, as you can imagine, on a lot this size on the beach block is very, very high. In addition to the land, the home itself is valued high, so we're not even going to come anywhere near the substantial improvement 50% rule. But the proposal as submitted does require some variances. They're not hardship variances, as Mr. McLaren points out. It's a substantial benefit, we believe, by keeping a fairly well-preserved house. I think everyone can agree that this is the type of property that the city wants to keep in its current state rather than have a fairly large spec house or McMansion built there, which the Perrys could obviously build. They're smart enough to know that the character of the house is probably better kept by just adding on. So having said that, I'm sure the board wants to.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So the only thing we're doing here is adding a second floor addition and it's a bath and a walk-in closet?
And moving, Mr. Richmond, correct, and moving the condensers.
Moving the condensers?
Yes.
Right, is that requiring a variance for the new condenser
No.
location? No. Okay.
So the answer to your question is yes. But
Eric, I think the total addition is like 82 square feet, is what I'm reading on the plan.
82.7.
well, why don't we? You're right, Mr. You see, this is great. Mr. Manos.
Sure, just state your name and address for the record, I'll swear you in.
Rebecca Fellerman. I'm a licensed architect in New Jersey with Asher Sloan-White Architects. I've been with them for over 15 years. And
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth?
yes.
Okay, now you can go ahead, thank you.
Okay.
You heard Mr. First of all, would you like qualifications as an expert in the field of architecture?
Yes, please.
Okay. Would you just testify that you're a licensed architect in the state where you went to school?
Okay. I went to the Catholic University in Washington, D.C., Catholic University of America. I have a professional degree from them. I've been licensed for over 20 years. I've been licensed in New Jersey, I think 15, maybe 14, and I've been with Asher for over 15 years, and I am I have specialties in residential design and historic preservation.
We'll accept our credentials.
Thank you. Okay, so Mr. Galantino briefly had a question about the size of the addition, but we can also walk through what we're doing and the substantial benefit versus the no presence of a detriment, but tell us what we're doing.
So currently at the back of the house, there's a one-story portion. On the roof of that is the condensing units. We're relocating the condensing units within allowable setbacks and building a two-story portion on top of that existing one-story. So while it is an expansion of an existing nonconformity, it is only a vertical expansion. We're not going any closer to the property lines than what's there now.
You're adding 2 stories, or you're adding 1
I'm
story?
adding one story.
Adding 1 story.
One story over the existing first floor.
Right.
So we're only expanding the second floor by adding a walk-in closet and a bath. That's it. 82.7 square feet.
Horrors.
And it's at the back of the house, so it's not visible from the street or the sides.
Notwithstanding that fact, obviously, it still does require variances.
Yes.
So in your professional opinion, based upon what you've designed and based upon Mr. McLaren's report, which we've agreed to, do you see any substantial detriment at all associated with this?
None.
And to the extent that there could possibly be a detriment, do you see that the benefits by keeping this house and by expanding it minimally would outweigh any possible detriment?
Absolutely.
And do you see any possibility that the construction of this addition would somehow be a detriment to the City of Margate land use law or the State of New Jersey municipal land use?
Absolutely not.
How about the neighbors?
Basically, there's pretty heavy vegetation planted on the property, so it's very well screened. In fact, we had trouble getting a clear photograph of the existing piece because there were so many plants and trees in the way. So we really don't feel that it's going to be a detriment to anyone because what's there now is so well screened.
We certainly have the ability to answer more questions from a historic standpoint, from an architectural standpoint, but it is kind of a de minimis application. But, you know, we play by the rules, so we had to come for the variance, and Perrys are very happy to keep their house. We don't think that there's anything really could possibly considered a negative, but unless the board has any further questions, we would rest on the case.
Anything further from the board? Any questions? Is there anyone here from the public that would like to comment or ask questions? Public portion is closed. Would you read the motion, please?
And Eric, you supplied an old survey with the application, and now you've just presented a current one? Or
Yes, Mr. Manos. So Mr. Ponzio's office just last week finalized their new survey. I do have, I think, 11 copies of that available. So that waiver, although it was requested, isn't necessary, but we'll give those copies to the city as you need. And I.
No, Eric has them.
The new one's on
That's a 200-foot setback survey.
21st. I think that one's a little bit older.
This one's an older one. That was the purpose of the waiver. But,
Eric and Rebecca, I just have one request. The AC units are supposed to be screened. Can you put something other than lattice up there for this type of building? I mean,
Do we have that drawing, Michelle? The condensed unit screen? We typically don't do lattice. We typically do, it's a louvered screen, so it's
Perfect.
much more screening than
this
lattice.
building deserves something more than just lattice.
Absolutely.
Right.
Can you make a note of that?
Every case were like this, you guys would have a very short meeting.
Yes.
Not bad. They're one step ahead.
okay, so someone needs to make a motion for C variance relief. It's just a rear yard setback of 6.79 feet, where 16 feet is required. The waivers are from an area map showing all properties within 200 feet. And as we just discussed, they submitted an older survey, which they've just updated. And the conditions will be, the one comment made about the screening for the HVAC systems and anything else in Mr. McLaren's report.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Tom Collins?
Eric, you are absolutely right. If every case was like this, it's wonderful. I think it's really nice that they hired you with your historical architectural backgrounds and that you actually took a lot of time for 82 square feet, to be honest with you. I think it's great. The house is a wonderful house. It's part of the history of Margate. And I think what you've done is just enhanced its value in the neighborhood. So I vote in favor for it.
Clem Wozleski?
All positives, no negatives. I vote in favor.
Rich Patterson?
I agree with Clem. I vote in favor.
Mike Cristaldi?
When I first saw the application coming in, I was scared to death they were gonna do something to wreck that house. When I saw this, you did a great job on it. I vote yes.
Jim Galantino?
I'm disappointed in Rich. He didn't have a good one on it. Oh, come on.
Didn't have what?
Oh, you save it for next time.
All right.
I vote yes.
Margaret Gubernalty?
De minimis application, no negatives, beautiful home, and I vote in favor.
Mike Richmond?
I don't see any negative impact on anybody, and I'm gonna vote yes.
Application passes 7-0.
Thank you.
Next case is Ronald and Debbie Miller, 19 North Haverford Avenue, Block 209.01, Lot 7, in the S25 district to grant C relief for building coverage, both side yard setback, combined side yard setback, rear yard setback, landscaping, and possibly others. Taxes and water are current, and proof of advertising and notifying is satisfied. Mr. McLarnin?
Thank you. One quick note on that case we just heard, if you want to save your plans, we can use those as compliance plans, to save them
I
reprinting.
collect all of them.
Okay, you got it? Should have
Thank
figured
you.
she'd have a good handle on it. Okay. Thank you, Board Chairman, Board members. This is the application of Ron and Debbie Miller at 19 North Haverford Avenue, Block 209.01, Lot 7, in the S25 zone. Effective firm, zone elevation 9. This is not a hardship variance, but it is a substantial benefit variance. Background is as follows. The applicant is seeking relief from the ordinances of the City of Margate in order to construct an addition on the second floor. It's a popular item tonight. Of an existing non-compliant single-family dwelling. The non-compliance also includes from flood damage prevention, and the property is subject to the substantial improvement requirements in the city's flood damage prevention ordinance, chapter 145. Zoning chart on page 2. I've identified one variance, and that would be the side yard setback on the left side, whereas 5 feet based on lot width is a required minimum side yard setback, and 2.8 feet exists and 2.8 feet is proposed. The theme of the night is vertical expansion. No checklist submitted as required. I suggest that a waiver be requested from the submission of the checklist. Brian, you willing to?
Oh, yes, absolutely, we would request that waiver, yes, please.
Okay, my comments are as follows. The second floor on the left side could be stepped in 2.2 feet, reduce mass and bulk, and not require any variances. The site, pardon me? The site is nearly impervious. The garage is attached and counts as building coverage and makes some of the setbacks appear worse than they really are. Existing and proposed parking meet the required minimum off-street parking spaces. The waiver checklist, Brian will request that waiver. No street trees exist and no grass planting strip is shown on the exist. I think that should be a condition of approval. The front planting bed is mostly river rock and should be replaced with grass and shrubs with fiber mulch as per ordinance. No stones are permitted within 3 foot of the public sidewalk. The addendum indicates that this is a hardship case, which it is clearly not a hardship case. The minimum lot size required is 2,500 square feet, and 2,700 square feet is provided. I'm not going to go through all my recommendations other than the comments I just made. C2 criteria case and proper testimony is required. Brian?
Yes, thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Brian Hune of the Law Office of Brian D. Hune in Northfield, New Jersey, on behalf of the applicant. I will have my witnesses sworn in a moment, but do want to pick up on a couple issues that we'll discuss. Number one, there was the mention by Mr. McLarnin that we could cut in the one side of the building and avoid the variance, or the second floor. We'll have testimony about, from an architectural standpoint, why that would be very difficult, and also why it would not maybe be less than aesthetically pleasing compared to what the proposal is going to be. I do want to also discuss the variance. We did put a variance request in on some of the landscaping, and we can discuss that. But With that said, I have both Mr. and Mrs. Miller with me, along with George Loza, a licensed architect. I don't know if you want to swear all three at the same time. and-
Yes.
Sure. Each you state your name and address or business address as applicable, and I'll just swear you all in together.
Debbie Miller, 19 North Haverford, Margate.
Ron Miller, 19 North Haverford, Margate. George Loza, architect in New Jersey.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
George Loza, registered architect in New Jersey, on Brigantine at 3219 West Brigantine Avenue.
And do you each swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Yes. Got you.
So-
Thank you.
Yeah, actually, with that, I think it's important because as Mr. McLaren pointed out, it seems to be a trend of helping to save existing homes. And I think there's a very nice story about why the Millers would like to do this. Also do want to point out, unfortunately, we're not quite as de minimis as the last one, but the improvement is less than 500 square feet. And with that, I think Mr. and Mrs. Miller can tell you a little bit about their history with the home, why they want to do this, and what their future plans are, assuming the board approves it. So, Debbie?
So we bought the house 10 years ago from Eddie and Gloria Pressman, and some of you may know them. And if I knew that I was going to do this, I would have just had Eddie come with me and stand here from Florida, but I didn't think ahead. Anyway, we bought it. It was just the two of us with our 2 children were in college. Now they're married, and we have 3 grandchildren and 1 due next week. So we can't fit like our kids and our grandchildren in the house at one time. So we just want to take the house that is already there, that we bought, and just raise the front part so that the living room and dining room that are underneath, so we have the same amount of space upstairs instead of the Cape Cod walls that sort of waste 12 feet of our house, so that we can have the room for the grandchildren and room for our children. Plus, I mean, you may not believe this, but I'm 63. I know you don't believe that. And he's 66. So in the next year or two, I'm going to stop teaching, and we want to retire here. And we need room for our kids to be able to be here with us. So that's why we're asking to do this. Plus, my girlfriends from both sides of my house, the 10 feet, 12 feet over side and the 2 feet over side are here to say, well, they can speak for themselves, but basically they're here just to say they don't care if we do this.
And just to confirm, one of the reasons you want to do this is so you're not forced to move or to demolish the house and build something
Right,
new.
I really don't want to do that. I love the porch. We still have Eddie's martini flag. We have a happy face flag. I mean, I love that house. It's like a tiny little old-fashioned, like old Atlantic City house with the 2 big porches, and we have the old awnings that we just replaced. I don't want to change it, and I don't want to knock it down and build one of those boring.
I think you'll find the board really appreciates and agrees with you, but one of the things we've really been pushing for is to bring you up to compliance with the grass strip and the trees and the
Well, we do have a
landscaping.
grass strip on the side. We
Oh,
can't,
why?
what?
You have cement. Where you have cement, you
I
can
know,
put a
but
grass
there's
strip.
really no room to put trees there. I mean, it would actually be a dangerous thing. I'd be happy to take the stones away and put grass or bushes or whatever,
And along the curb.
but there's really no room.
You have cement there. You take the cement out and put grass in along the curb strip, the governor's strip.
This big, you couldn't
Okay.
put it, we could,
Well, we'll get that in a minute, but we will pick up on that in a minute if that's okay, Mr. Patterson.
Sure.
Because I do want to kind of address that separately, but I think I'd like to address the variances on the home itself a little bit through Mr. Loza. Yeah. So, would you like Mr. Loza to provide his credentials? I know he testified.
Absolutely, yes. I haven't met him before.
I hold a master's degree.
Could you talk into the microphone over here? We need it on the record, and we can hear you, but the machine can't.
I have a master's degree from the University of Pennsylvania, Bachelor of Science in Environmental Design from the University of the Arts, and a MBA also. I've been licensed since 1987 in New Jersey, approximately, and have been at the shore here with my own firm for about 25 years.
And you're a licensed architect?
And I'm a
as you said.
licensed architect in New Jersey, yes.
Like to offer Mr. Loza as an expert.
We accept his credentials.
So, Mr. Loza, could you just describe a little bit about the design, and then I'm going to ask you a few questions about what the potential benefits are and some detriments, and I also want to discuss why avoiding the variance by bringing the one side in
Sure.
would be problematic and might even prevent the project from proceeding.
Yeah, we actually are calling the project an expansion and not necessarily an addition because it is a Cape Cod. There is existing stairs, fine stairs, full stairs that go up to that upper level. It's just upper floor. It's a full floor, it's just that it's quite narrow. So all we're really doing is, the livable area is quite narrow, so all we're really doing is adding 8-foot walls and raising the roof, well below any roof height, because we're still at the 2 stories. So we're calling it an expansion rather than addition. It's not the entire length of the building, it's just the front part of the building, 19 feet. The problem with setting it in, I guess I would tell a little story too, was that when I first approached the project, I was just looking blatantly at the ordinance, and it mentioned a 3-foot side yard setback. But actually, there was an addendum that made it a 5-foot setback. So at one time, I guess when the house was built, it was a 3-foot setback. So now you have a more strict ordinance for an area that hardly anyone complies, actually, because I've already worked on 3 places there in that, on that street. I had nothing to do with the guy with mannequins. I want you to know that. But
Which guy?
The fellow with the mannequins, or had the mannequins.
The Blue Lighthouse?
Yeah, he used to have the mannequins. I had to say that. I had to bring that up. But, so, the problem with setting it in, I would almost call that a physical hardship, though, so I'm surprised you would say that, because it's the variance has made the physical hardship on the physical property. It would involve a beam below, so their already finished first floor would be, the ceiling would at least be ripped out, the front wall would be partially ripped out, and a post would have to be put there. Some post would have to be somehow put in the kitchen counter, since it's not going all the way back. I don't even know exactly where that would land, since we're only going 19 feet. It probably wouldn't go to the back of the existing first floor kitchen if you look in the existing. But, so, that's one choice.
Well, and actually, Mr. Lewis, before we move on to that, I just want to make sure for the board to understand. The problem, if we do propose the wall where it's located, you can build on top of the existing exterior wall.
Yeah, build on top of the, right, exactly.
If you don't do that, something has to be done inside
Right.
the house to give the structural ability.
Yeah, I would have to put a beam in, right, underneath the existing floor joists. Or I could rip out all the floor joists and also the first floor ceiling and just make it flush, maybe, if that was deep enough. Maybe that would be deep enough so that it wouldn't hang down below. So we'd have this beam, protruding in their nicely newly finished, recently finished kitchen.
So,
And
Brian, you're trying to minimize the amount of cost for the addition to be built.
Absolutely.
It's not really a dollar issue so much, necessarily. I mean, it's sort of an aesthetic issue, actually, you might say.
And from an architectural standpoint, if we were to do that, if
Yeah.
you looked at the house, one side would go to the current exterior wall, and then
Yeah.
you'd have 2 feet of flat surface, and then another wall going.
Well, you could put the little hip roof there. You could put a pent roof there, yes, sure.
So here's the other thing. If you exceed 50% of the value of the house, then you have to elevate the entire house. So if you
Right.
can keep that cost down, you're about 120 right now, so you can only go to 60.
Well, actually,
Right.
And actually, I didn't submit this, Mr. Galantino, but we did obtain an appraisal, and the house appraised at $194,000, and we have a current estimate of $89,625. So we right now we're below the 50%, and but you raise a good point.
I need that for the permit process. We don't need that
Absolutely.
now.
Well, that's why we prepared it.
Just point of interest, if the house appraised from an appraisal, that includes the land.
No,
It's just the house.
just the
We
improvements.
specifically did an appraisal for
Just for the
purposes of the
house.
substantial improvement.
Got it.
I specifically asked the appraiser to do a substantial improvement appraisal. That's correct, yeah, but thank you for clarifying. And maybe I'll pick up on this a little bit. I know I'm taking away from Mr. Loza. One of our concerns is, as I understand it, if we have to do some of the landscaping as part of this, that will add to the improvement, or it will not? Okay. Oh,
It does?
I'm sorry, does it or does it?
Doesn't count.
Does not.
It does not?
Just the physical house itself.
That doesn't count?
No.
Substantial
Does not count.
Before I move on, Mr. Lowe's, I do want to pick one. First of all, you've had a chance to look at the neighborhood. If this were to be permitted, would it have any negative impact on the neighborhood? Like if we were permitted?
No, the air and the health and the height and the air and the light would remain the same. Both houses on either side are more than 10 feet away. Actually, it'd be almost more in keeping with the neighborhood, since much of the neighborhood actually has second floors already, more substantial second floors. And also, if you look at the inventory of the front yard setbacks,
We're talking from Mr. Kelling's
from Mr.
survey of
Cullen,
the...
yeah, addition to the survey, it actually has, it's among the lower third of the setbacks. In other words, it's further back than most of the other properties. But I did want to add my aesthetic bit to the property too, because it was very important to the Millers and Debbie particularly about making this bit of, on the front, a certain kind, something that she enjoyed seeing. So we drove all around Margate, and we took a look at a lot of things. But one of the inspirations for me that I've actually done was that I've tried a few times was the Tech Alumni Center at Drexel, which is a Frankfurt Nest building in Philadelphia on the corner. And this roof comes up sort of flat, so you're able to sort of squeeze it in. So it's a little bit what I did there with this kind of flared out metal roof, triangular a little bit, going back. And then just a little bit on the top, we can have a window there. And also, it's not really too dissimilar from a new house across the street, a bay window there. That's actually very nicely done, smaller house that has this double kind of roof and then also a metal roof. So it's in keeping with the neighborhood. But the aesthetic was very important to Debbie particularly.
And can I also pick up
Ron
on...
as well.
Can I pick up on the negative as well? Some of the potential negative impact. Given that we are basically taking a two-story house and simply somewhat, for lack of a better term, squaring off the second floor, will this really have any kind of negative impact on the zoning plan in Margate? Will there be like a negative impact on what Margate allows in that area?
No.
And now, are there any benefits to this by basically squaring this area off, short of doing something else? Does it help preserve the open space, or the light and other positive criteria for the neighborhood?
Yes.
And so with that, does anyone have any questions for Mr. Loza? If it pleases the board, I do want to somewhat address the concerns about the trees and the grass. We've talked about maybe putting a grass strip in. It is fairly thin there. We're actually somewhat concerned about the trees, and a couple points. I don't know if the board had a chance to drive down the street.
Yeah, I'm looking at an aerial photo. You have a grass strip on both houses on the side of you, and we're willing to let you put the trees behind the sidewalk if that grass strip is too narrow. But with the board's approval, I'm going to ask for a condition that all three of Roger's concerns be met.
And landscaping?
The rocks taken out, the strip put there, and the trees put there.
But,
Really, there's really no room for trees there. I mean,
Put it behind the sidewalk.
behind the sidewalk. That's what I mean, even if it's on the street.
What Rich is saying is that against the curb, you would still have just a strip of grass on the governor's strip. It's only a narrow, like everyone else. And instead of you putting your trees there, on the other side of the sidewalk in your front lawn where you're gonna remove the rocks, put your trees there. But we require, and we're pretty stringent on getting 2 trees for everybody. This is a going forward thing for the next 100 years with Margate. And it's very simple to do to get approved.
Oh, okay, is there like a special kind of tree?
The grass on both sides.
yeah, we can work with, and I'm sure we can work with your professionals. The concern, of course, is we don't want a tree that's going to risk, we bring it closer, we don't want to do damage to the house or the foundation or anything of that
Well,
nature.
you have pretty much the same strip as everybody else has, and trees are all over town.
The issue I have with the trees on that strip is that I can't walk down the street. We're going down because the trees are, I'm walking down the strip.
I think the board could take.
Well, I think what the board is also what we're proposing, it's not in effect right now, is the trees need to be bigger than what we're proposing, so they're higher. Your concern of hitting,
We're talking about the trees close.
I'm
That-
sorry.
that's a maintenance item.
It means nothing to us. You can't walk down the street, I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, we'll accept, yeah, we certainly will accept Mr. McLaren's condition, provided it's acceptable that they are closer to the house in lieu of on the grass strip.
Yes.
Okay. And we can revise the plans accordingly. So, with that, I don't know if any of the board has any other questions, or I know there's some members of the public who live nearby who might want to say a
So
word.
it's totally clear that you have to have the grass strip and you have to have 2 trees, but we're gonna let you put them on the other side of the sidewalk.
And you have to get rid of the
That's
rocks.
non-negotiable. That's a requirement, that's not a variance, okay?
Yep. No.
Huh?
You can discuss, Roger has a whole list of trees, so discuss it with him. And they have to be a certain size.
And we'll list the trees. Yep, and we'll revise plans accordingly for that, so. Again, if there's any other questions, I don't know if you want to open it to the public, or?
If the board has nothing else, I'd like to open it to the public. If anyone from the public has any comments or questions, state your name.
Ivy Mermelstein, 21 North.
State your name, state your address, and then
21
you'll
North
be.
Haverford.
State your name, state your address, and then
Ivy
stop.
Mermelstein.
Stop, please.
Okay.
Do we finish this?
State your name, state your address, and then stop and be sworn in, and then say anything you want.
Okay. Ivy Mermelstein, 21 North Haverford, Margate.
And do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Please continue now.
Okay. I'm the, one of the next door neighbor. I have no objection to the variance in terms of expanding their second floor. Will have no effect on my, my house. All right. I do, I understand now it is a requirement with the trees, but I do have a concern about that because we have like a nice access between our houses. We're very good neighbors. And so I do have a concern. I don't know if, you know, if it's the rule now, I understand, but I just want to sort of have my objection on record.
And that doesn't mean you have to have trees. If you
I
did
do have a tree, but-
if you did improvements to your house, that would come into effect, but we're not going around saying you have to have trees.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Next. Name, address, and be sworn in.
Laura Konauer, 17 North Haverford.
And do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
Go.
Thank you.
You gonna come up too? We both live at 17 North
Okay.
Haverford, so.
Okay.
Make it
And
easy.
you could state your name too.
Suzanne Ordilly, 17 North Haverford.
Last name again, I'm sorry?
Ordilly,
Ordilly. And do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I
So,
think I already
Go
swore,
ahead.
so good.
we love our neighbors, and we're so happy they're going to be retiring there. That's our ultimate plan. We love the aesthetic of the neighborhood. The plan, the variance that they have of kind of like squaring off the roof, we have no problem with it whatsoever. If we could echo what Ivy said about the trees, the way, we have tons of wires that come in right on that corner as well, and they all kind of clump. We do have one single tree, but we're constantly having to like call in people to cut it down so it doesn't mesh with the wires, which would pose a risk with all the winds that we get in the winter.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public?
Yeah, I totally agree with what she said.
Oh, I thought you spoke as one. Okay. Public portion is closed. Would you please read the motion? Any other comments from the board? Go ahead, you want to comment?
I just wanted to, subject to the requested waiver and the 3 conditions we talked about, we respectfully request approval.
You got it.
All right, so someone needs to make a motion for C variance relief for a side yard setback on the left side at 2.8 feet where 5 feet's required. There's also a waiver from the submission of an application checklist. The conditions, which we discussed, are 6, 7, and 8 under Mr. McLaren's comments, that they're going to provide for the 2 street trees, but with the understanding that they can be, they can get them in the strip, they can, but they can also put them behind the sidewalk.
Am I allowed to make a comment at this
Go ahead.
point? I'm looking, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 trees in the strip on your block. They can grow in the strip, but we'll still accept if you want to put them behind it.
And then
Google Earth is a great thing.
I know they'll provide the governor strip, and the issue with the planting bed will be replaced with grass and shrubs with fiber mulch as per ordinance, and they'll comply with any representations they made.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Who's second? Okay. Tom Collins?
This is a very, very, very de minimis expansion to a house of 492 square feet. And as the neighbor said, it really doesn't have an impact on the existing houses. I think that getting rid of the rocks and improving the landscaping and your trees, which I know you don't want, but trees are good for us. And Roger will help you pick out trees that'll fit your house. You don't have to get one type tree. But it will enhance the neighborhood. It will make you feel better over time. Trust me. And you'll enjoy, and I wish you a lot of luck. I vote in favor.
Clem Wasilewski?
I'm happy we're saving another existing home. Not getting more of the trash that we've been deluged with the last number of years. I see no problem. I vote for it.
Rich Patterson?
I think it's a great application. I think with the minor improvements that you're doing, the house is going to be 2 or 3 times as nice as it is now with not that much of a modification. I think it's a great improvement to the neighborhood. It seems like you're doing it under the 50% limit. It doesn't help you when the floods come, but you don't have to raise the house. But I really think this is going to help the neighborhood. I see no negatives whatsoever, so I wholeheartedly approve this application.
Mike Cristaldi?
I basically see no negatives with it at all. I see a plus with cleaning up, getting rid of the stone, bringing the yard back together, and not having a 40-foot tall, 6-bedroom swimming pool. I think it's a great application. Good luck with it. I approve.
Jim Galantino?
I think Brian did a great job with your application. Good to see him come to the board. This house looks like the old Pressman house, is that right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I thought so.
I said I should have brought Eddie with me. Then we
Eddie.
wouldn't have had to plant it.
Gloria.
Gloria, right.
It's correct. The house is going to fit that, when you walk up into the attic, you definitely hit your head. So this addition will help headroom, and it'll give them some more bedroom space. I don't see any hardship. I approve the application.
Margaret Gubernalty?
I agree with Mr. Patterson. I think it's a great improvement. I see no negative impacts. Fits well with the neighborhood. I like the green. Green is good. And the house has really good karma. So I approve the application.
Mike Richmond?
Yeah, I approve the application. I'm glad that they're gonna, they see the light in putting the grass strip in and the trees, so.
Application passes 7-0.
Thank you very much.
Can I make a motion to close the meeting, or we got?
Not yet.
Okay.
What do you want done with the 2?
Sure, absolutely.
Take them.
You take them? We take them?
take
And bring them to the next meeting?
Yes.
Okay, everybody, bring save the 2 applications that were postponed and bring them to the meeting. They won't be in your packages next month. Any other business, Roger?
No, but we should talk about the MS.
Now? Okay. We are going to discuss the MF zone, but we're not going to do it now. So, does anybody want to?
What do you mean we're gonna discuss the MS?
The problems on, that Valentin was talking about.
I'll make a motion to close the meeting.
Second? All in favor? Clem, would you take your hat off for the benefit of the board, please?
His head might come.